Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Regenesis by CJ Cherryh as I move my microphone around noisily. I'm Fraggoth, your intrepid narrator. I used to have a reliable spiel for all this, but I forgot what it was, so we're just gonna rock and roll. So last time, pretty much the big thing that happened, and it's the entirety of Book 2, which is a whopping, 50-odd pages long, is spent with Ari basically touring. Well, most of it's Ari touring the Alpha Wing construction site with Sam, who she likes very much, and he's done a great job. Things are looking up. Progress is coming along in a big way. It could well be finished by the end of the summer, and she, for her part, is very much ready to move, is now under the gun to be ready to move in when it finishes, because she does not want to get jumped. She wants to get that project moving forward so she can secure those she loves and likes being around. The other portion of Book 2 was taken up with Catelyn and Florian basically running their new security access, their new Regenesis sec security access through its paces to see what information they've got versus what they're able to get with Base 1, which is able to get at nearly everything within Regenesis. So it's not totally clear how much of what the differences are there are because of Hicks deliberately withholding information or due to Hicks literally not having the information that Base 1 is able to access. But suffice it to say, basically they're getting a better idea of who and what they need to keep an eye on. Have I mentioned that this book moves pretty slowly for a lot of its run? Not a lot happens. It doesn't hop around in the timeline either very much. So, the entirety of Book 1 was, I think, during May? April, May. And as we move to Book 3, we skip just a smidgen to June of 2424. So things are not moving as quickly as, say, and the status quo is not shifting as quickly as, say, the original site team does, where it's hopping by, years at a time. However, things will start to move later, as I recall, so get ready for that. All right. I will endeavor to get through the chunk I have set aside. We will see. I have a number of eggs I'm having to juggle at the moment, so I might have to interrupt it early. We'll see what time it is, or how far along I am when I hit, 2 hours in. Anyway, without all that out of the way, let's get rolling. And if you're out there tuning in, hello! Book 3. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 1. June 1, 2424, 15:28 hours. Growth proceeded at the same breakneck pace for Gerard, for Aban, for Seeley at 15 weeks. They were all without significant defect and on the path to being male. They took in amniotic fluid, practice and pressure alike expanding the rudimentary structures of their lungs, and Aban was now tallest of the three, a bit heavier, in grams, which was the scale on which they existed. Gerard's face was broader. Hard to see, but it was. They had human proportions, more or less. Their legs were longer than their arms were. Their rudimentary eyes, as yet without an opening in the lids, and not quite on the front of the faces, were growing sensitive to more and less light. A probing beam into a tank would get a definite reactive flinch. They didn't know they didn't like it, but change in what was drew response, an instinct to preserve the status quo. It wasn't fight-flight yet, just the beginnings of it. Details had emerged, taste buds, which would matter a great deal to Gerard, less so to Aban and Seeley. Those appeared, and simultaneously the ability to sweat, though sweat was not that useful in the fluid environment, in the rocking safety of the artificial wombs. They continued, enveloped by the soft, variable thump of a human heartbeat, steel mother sound, helping set the rhythm of their bodies. Individuality had asserted itself. Their fingerprints differed as surely as their DNA, and they were not like each other, not at all. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 2, June 1, 2424, 15:28 hours. There's a reason, I think, that the first Ari wasn't kind. Not many people were kind to her. They just gave her a lot of privileges or let her get away with what she wanted to do because they didn't pay attention, and that's not the same. So I don't think Ari quite understood about kindness. But I don't think having had kindness in my life means that I'm less driven to succeed than she was. My brain is as good as hers. I might have just a few different motives. She fought for power and her own protection. I fight to protect the people I love. But she fought, and I fight. That much is the same. The new wing, Alpha Wing, well, new in my time, though for you it's not. It's where you live now, unless somebody decides otherwise, or unless you decide otherwise for security reasons, or just because you don't like my decor any more than I like Dennis's. I don't know how long Regenesis can add new wings for every one of us that's ever born, but there you are. Or there you will be, I hope somewhat safe and comfortable in your day. And today I've given the order that will mean my Uncle Dennis gets born in due course 7 years from now, or whenever, if I'm sure I can compress the schedule a bit. That's a decision Yanni has left to me, but I'll probably stick to the 7 years. If I do, it's mostly for Gerard's sake. And I'm going to apologize to you right now about creating Dennis, because you'll probably hate him, and you'll probably have really good reasons. But I'm afraid Gerard is going to be too easygoing without him. And this time Dennis will be the young and ignorant kid, not me. I'm afraid by the time you come along... Oh, that's a period, not a comma. And this time Dennis will be the young and ignorant kid, not me. I'm afraid by the time that you come along, you'll get the old Dennis the way I did, and I'm sorry for that. I don't want to change Dennis's essential nature. It's his program. But I'll have to think about that, maybe for quite a few years before I actually order his gene set into the womb. I have plenty of time to get ahead of him. Once you start changing foundational things in our patterns, as you'll be learning, everything after that has to flex, and that's rapidly a field-too-large problem. A very, very big problem. The variables are terrible. And I don't know how well my upcoming move to a new wing will work. Wing 1 is historic, and it's important, and if architecture can embody a psychological structure, a lot of what made Regenesis is in its walls and its rooms. But I'm trying, at least, to set new patterns, and the new wing is where I'm making my start. Among first jobs, I want to patch all the things up that my Dennis deliberately broke. He sent a lot of people away, people I'd attached to, my playmate Valerie, and his whole family, even if they were Yanni's relatives. I missed him terribly. And they sent Mama and Ollie out to Fraggoth, and I couldn't do anything about it.
Maybe you've had people vanish from your life, too. I hope not. But if they have, pay attention to what I'm doing now. These people I'm calling home to me may be important to you in your own life, if they all live that long. And if I could substitute Valerie for Dennis for your sake, oh, I would do that. So fast. Valerie was so kind, so nice. He made me happy as long as I had him for a friend, and they sent him and his mother away precisely because I liked him. And we were only babies ourselves, well, nearly so. But I never forgot him. That's one piece of justice I'm going to do, first and foremost. I don't know how he's turned out. That's one. And Ollie. He was an Alpha Azzi when I knew him. He was Maman's companion. Right now he's director of the labs out at Fraggoth. He's very good at what he does. He's legally a CIT now, and of course he's old, far, far past 100, and a long time on Rejuve. And he'll do what he wants to. I'd so love to see Ollie again. I'd love to make everything right for him. He'd have grieved so much when Maman died, and nobody treated him with any consideration at all, here at Regenesis, or out there at the time. But I won't order him to come, as old as he is, and knowing the trip itself might be hard on him. Fraggoth was where she died, and for all I know he may be attached to that place, and it's certain he has his work out there. That's very important to Regenesis. No matter what I want, I wouldn't want to tear him away from his place there if he doesn't want to come back. And between you and me, I really don't think he will. And I've given invitations to the others, too, not necessarily to live in Alpha Wing, but maybe they will, if they're nice people. I want them at least to be able to come back to Wing 1, where they used to live. Valerie's mother was Andrea Schwartz, who was Yanni Schwartz's family, and Yanni couldn't protect her from being exiled. She was out there with Jenna Schwartz, who used to be in charge out there, but she was a fool, and Yanni moved her out. And then there's Julia Strassen, and I know she's still alive. She was Maman's real daughter, and I've written to her, too, to bring her back with Valerie and Andrea Schwartz. Mama had agreed to bring me up because she was a scientist. That meant Julia and her daughter Gloria had to stay away from the apartment and not upset me. Gloria was a brat, but her mother hated me for ruining their lives even if she knew it wasn't really my fault. I was a baby. I think Julia pretty well set up the atmosphere that made Gloria act up whenever they visited. She probably didn't intend to, which I think shows something about Julia. They're going away. I think that would have happened when I got to a certain age anyway, and I'm sure Dennis would have sent them away when he sent Mama. But I'm sure it hurt less for Aunt Julia to be mad at me than it did for her to be mad at her own Mama, and being mad at me was certainly a lot safer than being mad at Dennis and I at the time. So she was exiled to Fraggoth too, and I don't know what Mama thought about it, but I'm not sure she liked Julia or Gloria that much at the last. So it's time for all those old accounts to be settled, and for me to make amends as best I can, especially to Valerie, who never did anything in his life but be my friend without being in the program. My Mama's real name, you know by now, was Jane Strassen, and she was a brilliant woman and very dedicated to the project, but she wasn't ever cold to me the way Dennis was. Mama really loved me, and I loved her, which is probably the first place I deviated from the program, because the first Ari's mother wasn't kind to her at all. And I'm sure Mama started out loving Julia and Gloria too, but Gloria certainly wasn't very lovable by the time I remember anything about her, and Julia just looked daggers at me. That's all I can remember about her. Maybe she'll read my invitation and tell me to go to hell. I'd honestly be relieved. Why did Mama get involved in bringing me up and forget about her own daughter and granddaughter? I found out that Yanni talked her into it and promised her she could get off Cytine and go back into space where she was from. But at a certain point I think Mama got curious what I'd be like, and maybe she saw things about me that reminded her of the Ari she'd worked with, and deliberately encouraged some things and corrected others. I can't remember that part, and I haven't found all of it in records, but if you can find it, it might be worth looking at, just for your own curiosity, in case it answers some questions you have about me. I think Mama had some inkling of protecting me from Dennis, or maybe making the program work better for some altruistic or scientific reason. Because I was an experiment, after all, and Mama was a scientist, not somebody just mindlessly plodding along a track. I remember one day, Mama comparing Gloria to me and finally telling Julia to take Gloria and get out of the apartment. Gloria was trying to beat my brains in that day, so there was a reason, but I can still hear Mama telling Julia to get her daughter out of there, and even then I knew it wasn't the most politic thing she could have said to her daughter. When you live so long, when Rejuve lets you go through family after family, the layers get more complicated than nature ever designed us to deal with. That's a comma, I think. Let's try that sentence again. When you live so long, when Rejuve lets you go through family after family, the layers get more complicated than nature ever designed us to deal with, I think. The relationships get tangled, adults with kids, this generation's kids with the other one. They sell a lot of books advising people how to get along with poly-generational families and serial partners and Rejuve issues. Maybe by your generation it'll all be saner, but Rejuve was still a new issue in those days, and people didn't always handle it well. I know Mama's household was likely upset before I even got there, and my presence just drove Julia over the edge and made her do things that weren't smart. And Valerie, who wasn't even part of our family, the project directors couldn't have me getting attached to a friend or have me that happy, so they had to find a way to get Valerie away from me. There just wasn't much of anywhere to send his mother, Andrea, because she was doing classified work. So off they went to Razune Space at Fargon, where they could be in a sealed research community, involved with trying to clone another personality. Look up Rubin, if you're curious. Dennis was probably the one who ordered Valerie to go away, because at a certain point, you understand better than anyone, it was just time for life to get harder for me. So for starters, they sent Valerie away, and Julia and Gloria, and then when I was 7, they sent Maman away. And that was because the first Ari's mother died at that precise age, and it was time, in the project, for Jane Strassen to go away, along with Ollie, which was kind of Dennis, at least, that Ollie went with her. But I think Dennis never even thought about that. They just wanted everybody I loved to leave, and Dennis took charge of me one day and told me Mama was gone forever, and I had to move in with him, and that was the way things had to be. I was upset. I was terribly upset. Everything had been good, and then it wasn't, and he really hated having a child around. He made that clear fast. Worse, he particularly hated the first Ari, or at least what he felt about her was tangled and complicated. If what I think is right, he may be the one who killed her, or his Azzy did to protect him from her. And Aban and Seely are both dead, so nobody can ask them what the truth was, not that it matters, now, anyway. I hope, I really do, that you don't have to go through that kind of separation from people you love. But probably you've already had to, and maybe you hate me as a part of all of it, but likely by now you probably realize why you had to go through it, so I hope you forgive me along with the rest of them. I know I might not have survived my coming of age if I hadn't been through the fire. So maybe the first Ari was right, and if I'd had no stress on me, I'd be like that poor clone of Estelle Bock. I'd guess you still study that case, along with Rubin, or if you don't, do. They gave Bock, too, the best of everything, and that genius brain just floundered around with no boundaries, until it went way, way off into miserable territory, and became none too sane. Rubin wasn't a great success either, or isn't so far. He's just a pretty good chemist. And his predecessor, with every luxury in the world, committed suicide right in the middle of the program. Didn't that throw my keepers into a fit? So you are whatever you are, and I am what I became, because they were suddenly hard on me at the right time. The first Ari had had her mother telling her when to breathe in and out, until her life changed suddenly and her mother died and she was just Ari, trying to survive in Razune and not to have anybody murder her. She suddenly had to fight. So did I. Maybe so do you. So even at 18 years old, I'm still sorting out what the project did to me, and I can say I'm all right and I'm glad I learned to defend myself. But I'm not satisfied with just finding out I'm all right. Now is my time to try to sort out what the project did to other people. People the project didn't give a damn about. Oh, people, the project didn't give a damn if it hurt. Maybe it will work. Maybe it's beyond recovery. But I intend to try. I hope all those people will find a way to love me after all. It's selfish, but I do hope so. Is that a vulnerability? Maybe. But it's me. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 3, June 1, 2424, 1540 hours. Ari shoved back from the console, replayed the last bit, struck it out, disturbed by what had come out of her in that rambling account, not sure it was good for her successor to hear that much honesty, whether that it was too stupid, that badly written, too naive to say, or whether it revealed too much. It was embarrassing, was what. It revealed a trigger, a touch point. That was worth considering. It was just too personal. But her successor had to know her. It could be life or death. And she recalled that section, reviewed it, then entered the code that made it, with all the other entries, unerasable. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 4, June 6, 2424, 1657 hours. It ought to be supper time, but it wasn't, yet. The new domestic staff was finally arriving. Ari had put on a favorite rose sweater and a nicer pair of pants, plus a little jewelry, anxious to have the new people have the best impression of her and the household. Catelyn and Florian had missed their dinner time, too. There was never a time she met strangers that they weren't right beside her. Marco and Wes were in the security station, it being their shift as of an hour ago, but the rest of staff was stirring about in the kitchen, getting ready with a nice little party, sandwiches and refreshments for the incomers. Herself, she was thinking of that pile of sandwiches when the word came that the group had passed building security, presented their IDs, and been logged in. That was about a 3-minute process to reach upstairs via the lift, another to reach her apartment. Deep breath. And a group of people exited the lift and approached the apartment. Corey was on duty there, with his partner, Mato, and the two Marco and Wes identicals. They were spit and polish for the occasion. And, no question, the group on the other side of the door would be all nerves. They were just contracted. It was birthdays, weddings, and first jobs all rolled into one bundle and presented to them, and they were contracted not just to any client, mind, but, she would think so without overmuch egotism, to her. With all she meant to make that mean to them, every advantage, every comfort for her staff, she'd do well for them, and they'd help her run the new place once they moved over. She stood in the hallway, hands folded. Corey opened the doors to the newcomers, a handsome lot, mostly male, all wearing the typical Azzy barracks issue. Her domestics, like Corey and Mato, wore dark blue. Her security, like Florian and Catelyn, plain black. These wore, at the moment, gray. The group stopped, shuffled a little, made room for the lot of them in the foyer. They eyed her respectfully. "I'm Ari I, she said, and that name would resonate off their contracts, which was much, much more than paper. The whole group bowed as if one nerve ran through them all. "I expect," she said, "that you're Theo."
Theo BT-384, sirrah,
the foremost identified himself, a dark, square-faced man with a cleft in his chin. "Theo, you're our new majordomo."
Yes,
Theo said cheerfully, and drew forward the woman at his side, a thin, boned blonde with fine features.
my partner, Jory.
Jory will be your direct assistant in your post. Pro tem major domo has been Callie. You'll work with her to get settled in. Callie will be household administration and chief of supply hereafter, and answer to you, but no other on staff. Theo bowed. Jory did. Very satisfactory, she said. I'm very pleased with you. Meaning new contracts. As their supervisor, she found it was of utmost importance. Meeting new contracts as their supervisor, she found it was of utmost importance to offer reassurance, confirmation. They were psychologically exposed as never in their lives, and so much hung on her expressions and her tone. "And who is Wyndham?" she asked. Wyndham stepped to the fore, one of the most anticipated of arrivals, their new cook, with his partner, Hiro. That meant that Yanni, who did excellent desserts, could concentrate on his specialty and give the running of the kitchen over to someone who could orchestrate dinner for 8 and take great delight in showing off. Logan, Hayes, Thomas, Spessy, unless it's Haze? Could be Haze. They were general work. Logan, Haze, Thomas, Spessy, they were general work, domestic and repair. The 2 remaining women, Dell and Joyess, were solely to attend her personal needs, do her hair, handle her wardrobe, and double-check her appointments and calendar. And Callie showed up, nodded very respectfully to Theo and Jory when introduced. "Very well done," Ari said to Callie, because it was important, too, that the original household staff feel appreciated, and by no means diminished in the arrival of more specifically trained individuals. "You've all done extremely well under very trying circumstances. Nothing supplants your respect, and you retain a special place in my regard for being with me longest and managing everything. I have a special affection for my senior-most staff. I have every confidence in you in this transition. Understand, this arrival frees you of any extraneous duties, and you will repeat this verbatim to all the staff. You are needed and much respected." "Sarah," Callie said, and bowed. Her eyes sparkled. That last bit was all keywords, deep set, key to this staff's feelings of accomplishment, resonating specifically off deep sets like an affectionate caress, and Callie was empowered to pass it on. "Shall I guide the new staff, Sarah?" "Do," Ari said, letting Callie, for her last time, function as chief of staff. She stood quietly for a moment with Mato and Cory. "Well done," she said to them. "Very well done."
If this is making your skin crawl a little, I believe that's part of the point. It's a very different setup than we are accustomed to. For what it's worth, I'm pretty sure CJ Cherryh is not A-OK with indentured servitude and slavery. And the fact that you can use keywords to make someone do your bidding or feel good and thus manipulate them. But it does make for a fascinating sociological study. Moments like this really give me the ick. I'm just like, this is wrong. This is wrong. But at the same time, it's, they are eventually going to be freed people. Eventually. Bows. The spark of pleasure, the little reserve of Beta Azzy, very, very secure in their posts and their place in the house.
Sarah,
Cory said for the both of them. Florian and Catelyn, no need to reassure them at all, but she smiled at them simply because she was happy. It felt like walking a tightrope, selecting new staff, taking contracts, trying to be sure the incomers, totally vulnerable, felt an instant connection and sense of place. She made eye contact with each and every one, saw their expressions, read them far easier than reading any CIT in their current state. "In and safe, Sarah," Florian said. She laid a hand on Florian's arm, and on Catelyn's, not a calm down, just gratitude. She felt physically tired, as if she'd given off an energy that outright exhausted her, poured it into those wide-open faces on whom she'd rely for her comfort and her safety. Or perhaps it was the immediate letdown of having been absolutely on all day, waiting for these people, her people, picking what she'd say and planning the way she'd ease staff about their arrival. Those things, and the plain fact, it was supper time. Callie's tour would end in the kitchens, Wyndham's new domain, where Yanni had been working on one of his tour de force desserts to impress the new master chef. They'd have supper together, the new staff and old, and meanwhile she found herself ravenous, a good sign. She'd arranged all the staff to be attending the dinner. The fare otherwise was cold cuts and sandwich makings, and that, with 2 bottles of imported champagne, was waiting for her and her security staff. Florian and Catelyn, too, had worn themselves out trying to be all things and everywhere for months. Now they wouldn't have to turn a hand to make a bed or find a midnight snack. Anything they wanted at any time always would arrive, double quick. They'd never experienced that situation, not since they were all children together, and they'd had Uncle Dennis's staff waiting on them. "I'm happy," she said, hugging their arms tight. "I'm starved. Let's go have supper." "Marco and Wes are on duty," Florian said. "They can have champagne too," she said. "They can come. It's not as if our enemies will stage a raid." "When better?" Florian asked soberly, but she squeezed his arm a second time. "I love you both, but let's take the risk, shall we? Champagne, strawberries, and cold sandwiches. It's a security picnic in the conference room." They were bound to worry. It was what they did. And in the end, they called in Marco and Wes, cued the conference room screen to display the security station main screen, and had their champagne and strawberries. It was mostly for their sake, for the staff. They'd taken care of her through so much, and they did things that weren't their duty doing it. It was one more step toward that apartment. They'd be crowded for a while, but that wouldn't last long. Then, things began to be real, with a capital R. She didn't want to think about that tonight. There was a baby, she recalled, a boy named Auguste GYX, the first baby she'd ever seen in the labs, the first time she really began to think about what Rezun did. And she'd said to herself a long time ago that she wanted to be sure that baby turned out all right. That when his contract came up, she wanted to take it. And he was something around 13, still in training, a gamma, clever at a lot of things. And for some reason, with staff coming in, she thought of him and thought, I want to know what they're prepping him for. I've got the power to do that now. I can write a set for him. I can take the 13 years and just bend it in a direction I choose, something I can eventually use, something to put him on staff. Not have him shipped off to Novgorod and have him supering in a factory where I'll lose track of him. I can work with a gamma set. I'm going to call in his manual tomorrow. I can write a program for him. It'd be nice if he liked fish. Things had gotten quiet. She looked at 4 faces, Florian and Catelyn, Wes and Marco, all quite sober. Their notion of a wild staff party was a glass apiece, all gazing at her, waiting for her to say something, or to really look at them. This, she said, is a point of change. From now on out, we don't depend on Yanni for many things we now ask of him, including my study tape. Wes, tomorrow I want you to walk over to library and physically pull a manual for me. It involved printout. Shall I call it first? Wes asked, meaning should he call library and have it prepared for him to pick up. No, ask there and wait for it. At the very least, she didn't want a request on file before she had the GYX General Manual in hand. There could well be more than one GYX in progress, and even Wes didn't need to know which GYX she was interested in until she had that particular file in hand. It wouldn't remove it from library, and anyone interested could still get it, with the sort of clearance, for instance, that Hicks or Yanni had. But once she duped that manual in-house and began to write changes on that program, she would have her GYX's particular record, and Yanni wouldn't. He could find out what tape they'd run down in labs, but he couldn't find out any oral working she'd done, and he wasn't good enough. She'd bet on it, to look at the tape list and immediately know what structure she was building or what her GYX was destined to be. She had the individual manuals on Theo and Jory and the rest. Those came with them. And those individuals would see changes very soon that weren't on the lab records. She'd prepare tape of her own creation, and when she was through, they'd be hers, no one else's, ever. That was the way the system worked. Justin could pass on that too, but she'd done more. Yes, Justin could pass on that. Justin could pass on that too, but she'd done more than population dynamics in recent weeks. She'd studied set alteration and deep inhibition as well as integrations. And she'd taken a look at some of the first Ari's set designing on the Gehenna project. It wasn't just history of that project she'd been after. She hoped she could spot a deep teach bug in the ASI she'd taken in, that she could spot it, correct it, and have that ASI absolutely trustable. It wasn't brain surgery. In many cases, it was plain language, like what the first Ari had instilled at Gehenna. This is your world. Your world, deep taught in those ASI minds, without any reference to the born men the military had sent out there deliberately to fail, mess up the planet, and die. The military had thought they were simply giving Alliance a poison pill, knowing they'd take Gehenna and Union wasn't in a position to. But the poison pill the military hadn't counted on, in their own planning, had been letting the first Ariane Emery know that her ASI were destined to become an embedded, dying, and miserably poor population on a planet the Alliance was going to claim. Ariane Emery didn't do that sort of thing to her ASI, no. She gave them the planet and told them to survive and take care of it. And survive they did, becoming foreign and odd in the reckoning of what was human, but they lived. They succeeded. The first Ari had, as best she'd ever been able to discover, given her Florian and Catelyn, and Yanni had given her Wes and Marco, and she'd taken Callie and all the rest. There were going to be, very soon, some deep sessions for certain staff, not for Florian and Catelyn. They would be quiet, refreshing sessions with some very specific instructions keyed to their sets, instruction which could make them very devoted or very dangerous, depending on her skill at intervention. "You are my first staff," she said, "and the core of my staff. What you say, I will always hear, and I rely on you for loyalty and intelligence." Heads dipped, eyes fixed on her. Supervisor. They heard that as they'd hear tape, and they drank it in. "You are special," she said, "and your decisions matter. The secrets of this house stay in this house. This is for Marco and Wes. If you have to trust someone, and you have to make a judgment outside this house, trust Justin Warwick." Again, solemn nods. Just a little resisting flicker from Florian and Catelyn, who'd been excluded from that last sentence. Wes and Marco were absorbing it all. Deep state, as he could do without the deep teach drug, as almost now she could do. Her concentration could go that deep. And only with their contracted supervisor would Azzy accept instruction at that level. She looked at Wes and Marco, saw their pupils dilated, a sign of deep state, which said something on its own. They were hers. About Florian and Catelyn she had no question at all, never had. She'd doubted herself at times, which, she thought, was only healthy to do, but now that she'd begun to focus on real things, on taking over, she began to think, I have to. I have no choice, do I? It's life or death. My staff has to be mine, especially my security. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 5. June 6, 2424, 21:22 hours. She had someone to turn down her bed that night. Spooky, at first sight. She wasn't used to that, not since Nellie had left her. She assumed Joyce had done it, or ordered it. She put on her nightgown, unaided, draped yesterday's clothes over the chair, and started to go to bed. But the computer in her room suddenly showed a unique flasher on an otherwise dark screen, a flasher that lit the adjacent wall red, and her heart picked up its beats. Not a mail notification that blipped quietly in a corner. Log on, it said, across the screen. She sat down at the counter and did that, no question. And the screen blinked and became text. So, you're making a move toward power, Base 1 said in the first Ari's voice, and you wonder how I can guess that. Wonder instead who else can guess it and act appropriately. It wasn't really Base 1 doing the thinking. It was the first Ari who'd set certain criteria, and when she met them, things turned up. This one had. And it sent a chill down her back. No good trying to talk to it. It had something to say, and it would say it come hell or high water. Correctly identify your allies and your enemies, young Ari. I don't say friends, because that word is misleading, and it can deliver you into a serious mistake. Some people you don't like are allies, and some people you do like are enemies, once you choose a certain course of action, and by now you should understand that. She did. She had understood it. But Ari Sr. put it into words in a particularly cold way. She did. She had understood it. But Ari Sr. put it into words in a particularly cold way that did nothing for the shivers. She wore a thin nightgown in a room cooled for nighttime, and she hugged her arms about herself, because Base 1 wouldn't stop once it started, wouldn't stop, wouldn't pause, didn't care about her weaknesses or her excuses. Rely on Florian and Catelyn, no others. There was Justin, Marco, Wes. But, she thought, Elder Ari didn't know them. But if Elder Ari had intended to leave a loophole, she would have left it. Particularly be cautious about trust. Trust stops reasoning. Look carefully at those you trust. Taking offense stops reasoning, too. You may find a certain person has betrayed you. Limit the offending person so his misdeed cannot possibly repeat itself. Waste no time in regret or sympathy. I'm about to do that. I'm ahead of you there. I'm ahead of you here, older Ari. Assume the worst case where it regards those possessing what you intend to take. Assume violent resistance or clever resistance. Assume sabotage. Once you move decisively and pitilessly to protect your own allies. If you have pity, bestow it appropriately on those helping you. Reward compliance, and you'll be surrounded by the compliant. That's not necessarily a good thing, older Ari. Which is not necessarily a good thing, young Ari. That was spooky. That was just downright scary. You'll need complete control of Regenesis to protect yourself. For the rest, rely on Base 1. At need, you can lock anyone out of communication. Your code word is Kane, Kane, Kane. Input that, and the base you target will only respond to you. You will, at that point, be able to dispense other code words, so have them ready, but hand a base access only to those who are both friends and allies. Control on a platter. Elder Ari had set it all up for her, the way Elder Ari had had Base 1 assemble itself out of bits and pieces and come alive. She'd triggered something without intending it or even knowing it existed, and possibly it would just roll on like a juggernaut without her being able to stop it. She thought, I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I want to lock Yanni out. I'm not ready to do that. Hicks's people, they could start shooting. Hicks is Yanni's man, I'm pretty sure. What am I supposed to do about that? Key your receipt of this message so the program is sure you heard it. It will replay on demand should you need to review it. I recommend that. She keyed her login, said yes to the question, and the screen went dark again, shut down. She hugged her arms around her and stared at it, feeling the cold go numb, the mind traveling its own starless space. Joyeux found her that way some time later, and hovered by her, saying, Sarah, Sarah, are you well? She knew it was Joyeux. The surface mind still took account of things, but the deeper thoughts didn't want to be interrupted. She got up and walked toward the bed, and got in, letting Joyeux draw the covers over her. She shut her eyes, but she wasn't asleep, wouldn't sleep, not while her thoughts were going over the dynamic that was Rezun, and the legislature, and the necessity of appropriating Regenesis. She didn't want to pull the trigger. She didn't want to lose Yanni. She didn't want to treat Yanni as an enemy, but Hicks had told Florian they were going to have top-level access, and either Yanni was hiding things from Regenesis or Regenesis was hiding things from them. And that wasn't good. Hicks was giving them a gift. Did they trust the 30 agents they were getting?
Assume the worst case where it regards those possessing what you intend to take.
I do have to do something, and something we've done put Base 1 on alert. It had a trigger tripped. Something that I did, or that Florian or Catelyn did, tripped it, and that means Yanni may figure it out too, or Hicks might. If it wasn't us that tripped the alarm, if Yanni's moved... It was the middle of the night. She couldn't call Justin. She shouldn't call Justin and ask him to hurry in his assessments on the security sets. That wasn't the way to get the best results. Base 1, however, could find out how he was doing. Base 1 could get into any computer in the wing. She got up, grabbed a robe from the closet this time, and said, "Base 1, on." Base 1 asserted itself in the computer and turned the terminal on. She sat down. She searched up computers that were active in the wing and found Justin's office net with no trouble at all. It was listed as secure, probe-proof. That meant nothing to Base 1, which ran system in the wing. She simply had a look into the files and ran a search for recent files involving betas. There they were, in a folder labeled Goddess 1. Goddess, was it? Sarcastic, maybe. Justin could be that. It was certain he had no interest in her that way. He'd made that clear when she was so much too young. And he was settled with Grant. She'd be a fool to mess with that attachment, a really great fool. She read the notes on the people Hicks had sent her. Justin had started with the bottom at the gammas. Number 1 gamma, passed. Number 2, passed. She read far beyond that. He had left the betas for last, and was 2 individuals from finishing, which meant he might be done tomorrow. "Sarah?" From the door, Joyeux again. Oh, that's a period. From the door, Joyeux again. "Sarah, would you like anything?" "Nothing," she said, and Joyeux went away. Ari delved deeper into her own understanding of sets, and read Justin's notes, and absorbed his comments, which made sense. He saw, clear as clear, where the sets were vulnerable to a command, and noted push-button items that just had to be patched, was all. Easy to do. She knew the way to do it. People reacted to expectation of good stimulus, like praise, to fear linked to imagination. Imaginative people feared a wider range of things. And some people had an off switch that routed an idea to the analytic faculties, and some, muse, which they didn't birth many of, were like that. You started them on a track and they'd follow it without a second thought. Muse wanted everything to be the same all the time. They were happier when it was like that, unless they were assigned linked to a desire for an adrenaline rush, which was a whole other problem. Betas, however, tended to overcheck and hesitate, and reconsider, given an adrenaline rush, they dithered a second and then acted. These were guards. They had lightning-quick fuses where it came to threat against their contract holders. But she also had to defuse their pause switch, where it came to reluctance to report something as yet unresolved. Report any anomaly to Florian or Catelyn immediately, she'd tell them. They'll take the responsibility. And being Azzy, the new people would do that, once they took the order deep. They'd want that contact with Florian and Catelyn. They'd be uneasy and unresolved until they got it, and they'd run to get it. And if there was some buried contrary instruction in the stack, say, one to report to Hicks or Yanni, something that just somehow hadn't gotten into the records, that command to go to Florian, emphasized with a hard drug punch, would send them into profound emotional conflict. Enough to show up, fast, in a very, very upset Azzy. If you ever feel conflicted, she'd tell them, additionally, report to Florian immediately. If you can't find a bug in a set, Elder Ari's tape had told her, just do something to make the conflict show itself. Make the subject react, never mind finesse. Make the subject react, never mind finesse. Present a quandary contrary to the direction you suspect the bug to react, identify it, and excise it. So just give me the files, Justin. Quit fretting. I need to get to work, and I need these people. Whatever's been done, if it was done, it's not going to be in any record. That's what we have to worry about. Justin thought she was still studying the basics, maybe thought she was out of her depth with these security sets, or he was, which was possible. He hadn't really worked with the type before. She had, from childhood. She knew Florian and Catelyn. She looked at the possibilities in a security ASI tape. And she suddenly had a picture of how to solve any problem in a security ASI set. It was right in the same place in the set that they attached the compulsion. Just conflict it, and get angst in the subject, and then resolve the angst, leaving the subject feeling oh so much better. In ASI, deep set work was so much easier. Deep set stuff didn't need to be unhooked from all sorts of randomly acquired born man thinking, which ran like a bad cabling job. And it didn't even have to be unhooked from the later instructions. If there were conflicts, they'd show. The ASI in question, above Delta level, was very likely to report his own conflicts. ASI were so elegantly clean. A thought led to very planned places, economical, and ideally unconflicted. Everything structured and architectural and efficient. And she wasn't. God, she wasn't. Her thoughts skipped all over the place. They tunneled, they ran riot through completely extraneous topics, they hopped from one point to another. Pity the programmer that tried to solve her. But a beta with a buried directive? Damn if she couldn't bring that to the surface by exactly such brute force mechanics as the first Ari said. And she'd make the tape for the head of her new security. Beta ASI he might be, but she could make the instructional tape herself, right to the deep sets, and be sure of him. She'd send Catelyn down to barracks to sit there and personally see he got it. And when he woke up, he'd know definitely who was in charge and who could cure any angst he felt. She could help him. She would be his first recourse, in any case of doubt, because she was the highest authority in Regenesis, and Regenesis was the highest authority on the planet, and an ASI who had access to her had access to having his questions answered definitively and absolutely. An ASI who obeyed her directives was always in the right, as any ASI, I'm going to try that again. An ASI who obeyed her directives was always in the right, as any ASI wanted with all his being to be correct. Any delivery of information to anyone other than her chain of command was utterly forbidden. Any request from anyone outside her chain of command had to be cleared, and any lingering doubt was utterly overcome by the power she had within Regenesis. She owned his contract, and any ASI under that authority could be assured, very assured, that he was psychologically safe following her orders. She took notes. She took abundant notes on the officer's set, which she had scanned before she sent it to Justin, and for good measure she looked up deep sets for 4 of the unrelated gamma genotypes with a related program list, for whom the same tape would be quite sufficient. For 3 others, again program sets related to each other, she could do a minor modification in the directive, but it sufficed. For the newly arrived Theo and Jory, a little different approach, but much the same. Physically, they were easier to get at. Intervening with Hicks's incoming security team was logistically a little harder, but Catelyn could manage. Catelyn would go armed, and if the subjects had a psychotic episode, meaning her rewiring had hit a major or lethal block, Catelyn would deal with it, get the individual sedated, and notify her, specifically, that someone had tried something.
Sorry, Justin. Sorry you've had to sweat this, and I know you hate real-time work worse than poison. You don't need to send it to me. I see your notes, and they help me. They show me what I need to do, and it's in the deep sets, not the things they've hung on it. No wonder it's driving you crazy. It's like a birthday cake, icing all over, decorations here, decorations there, all sorts of programs and routines added on, none of it really showing you what's underneath. We just need to slice right into it, and you're far too kind for that. But I can't afford to be. Maybe later, but not now, not in this.
Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 6. June 7, 2424, 0821 hours. Early to the office, early to work, mindful of the extra requests, and there was a note from Ari, time-stamped yesterday at 1701.
Justin, I'm really anxious to have your comments on the sets I gave you. Please hurry.
Hurry. Hell, he'd already hurried. Then another one, time-stamped this morning at 0131.
It's not that urgent. Relax.
Haste makes waste, he messaged back. But I'm hurrying. I should have something for you this evening. And when are you sleeping, anyway? Little Sarah wants miracles, he said to Grant. Lunch is going to be in today.
No problem, Grant said. Shoot me what you have. He shot. Grant took it, and there was silence for an hour until Grant ran out of coffee. Grant filled his cup, fuel for the morning. And into the afternoon. Grant ordered sandwiches delivered, with cream pastry. Justin devoured his, reading and annotating the while. One set to go, a fairly simple one. He'd been over it 20 times. He'd done all the betas to try to understand the type. He didn't find a handle on it anywhere, and it wasn't right. It wasn't right. It wasn't the level of work that belonged on a contract she was taking. At first he'd suspected subtlety. Then he'd suspected error. Now he had a different picture. Library censorship. Again. He said to Grant,
You know what I think? I don't think library's given us all the records yet. Florian thought he had that cleared up, but I don't think he did.
It would answer your objection.
We're 2 weeks overdue on this, but I'm afraid it's the fact there's security. Ari's going to have to go back to library one more time on her access. There's something still we haven't gotten.
It would answer the question, Grant said. You're right, and after the last round, I wouldn't want to be in the librarian's shoes. You get to write the memo, born man. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 7. June 7, 2424, 1542 hours. The Azzy in question, BR-283, was a nice-looking fellow. Catelyn observed that on the monitor, while BR-283, Raphael, was deep asleep. Nice face, nice body, dark as Florian, taller than Florian. But absolutely no attraction here, just an aesthetic note. Raphael BR wasn't Florian, and wouldn't be, being a beta, a situation which suited her. Betas took orders. Alphas didn't need orders, just a goal. Sarah had explained the situation to her, as much as, in Sarah's judgment, she needed to know. And prime among Sarah's instructions was the posited call every 15 minutes while she was on this assignment. She was to beware any food or drink offered by lab staff. She was to disobey any command to leave or submit to detention, herself. But if held, she should not risk injury. Just wait for Sarah to take action, within the next 15 minutes.
That was advisement enough that Sarah considered these tapes important to give personally to 4 of the new security team. The situation itself hardly seemed dicey. Walk into the labs with the tape, possibly containing the contract itself, invoke Sarah's name and Sarah's order to give access and order this group to lab, where she personally installed each tape, waving off the assistance of staff. And it had run for a relatively tedious hour and 42 minutes, while Raphael, BR, and the other 3 of Sarah's choosing slept with their eyes occasionally open, and occasionally reacted, or smiled, or concentrated. Contracting didn't take long. So what else were the tapes? That wasn't hard to guess. They were probably primary tapes, a slightly amended refresher on the most basic sets. Tapes like that were generally quite pleasant, an hour or so of confirmation, affirmation, a transcendental experience when a supervisor offered it to a troubled or stressed Azzy. In this case, it was likely some patch to enable the 4 to work together under BR-283's direction. And since Sarah had the accesses she did, and she'd signed for them and meant to deliver the contract tape herself, she was perfectly within her rights to order it, and to order that her own staff carry out the request. For BR-283 and for BG-8, BJ-190, and BB-291, the same, even if the 4 were listed as Regenesis. A note might have gone to Hicks, but Hicks hadn't intervened. The other 3 were in the adjacent rooms, on the other 3 active monitors, affording a constant view, 2 of them on the same tape, 1 on a third, and all, presumably, experiencing primary tape. Blissful and content. They were also all on the same schedule, the tape very soon to run out, by the individual counters. And after that, they would enjoy a little peaceful sleep. Tedious, but she'd stay until they waked naturally. She'd bring them up the hill herself, the core members of the team Hicks had provided, having passed them through a sieve and having assured they were She'd bring them up the hill herself, the core members of the team Hicks had provided, having passed them through a sieve and having assured they were settled in advance of the others. More, Sarah provided her own tape without a Regenesis indexing sticker on it. They were Regenesis personnel, and the lab had taken a momentary issue with that, and had wanted to call the lab supervisor and Hicks about it, but Catelyn had stood fast, maintaining that, indeed, Sarah did hold the contracts, was a licensed Alpha supervisor. There were 5 such in all of Regenesis proper, 6 counting Jordan Warwick, and if a beta tape issued from an Alpha supervisor's office, then a beta supervisor should accept it and run the tape as requested. My principal, Catelyn had reminded the man with some firmness, is Ari I. One could watch the thoughts pass through the supervisor's eyes, a born man considering his career options, perhaps. He hadn't been more cheerful after that, but he'd been polite. And he'd let her insert the tapes she'd brought, giving her access to a whole row of lab beds, clearing 2 other doubtlessly deserving Azzy who'd been scheduled for the afternoon. This is Sarah's business, Catelyn had remarked further, as severely as possible, and intimately pertains to her household. She will appreciate discretion. Your name is John Elway. Mine is Catelyn AC-7892. I will report. Reading born men was possible when they were strongly conflicted. The man just nodded, and likely had not made a phone call to higher levels, even yet. Twitch of BR-283's head. Catelyn looked critically at that subject and let it pass. Possibly he'd just met a small alteration in his program. The dose had been heavy. BR-283 probably could have taken the tape without the drug, but he was deep enough that a twitch was unusual. Twitch became a tick, jerk of the hands. Let the tape run, Sarah had told her. Let it complete. The subject sat bolt upright, eyes staring, then vaulted off the couch, right into the wall, a wall that assuredly was not there in BR-283's vision. He rebounded against the couch, fighting for balance. He was dangerous in this state, dangerous to himself. He hit another wall, hard. His forehead was bleeding. There was a red button that could call help. Catelyn opted not to use it. By the clock, she was due to call base. She touched the comm button on her shoulder and said, "Catelyn here. There's been a reaction." The micro receiver in her right ear said, in Sarah's voice, "I'm coming." The other subjects were getting to the end of their tape sessions without hurling themselves off their couches. There was one subject huddled on the floor in a fetal tuck in the corner, one subject in the throes of a psychotic episode from the deep tape he'd been given, and that individual happened to be the officer Hicks had put in charge of the unit, Raphael BR-283. That said something. And John Elway had not come to assess the progress of the session. In a little bit more, John Elway would have visitors to the section, visitors who would not be prevented. She watched the other Azzy, walked to the one-way glass and looked at BR-283, who had gotten into a corner the camera didn't completely reach. He was bleeding down his face, shaking and rocking. It wasn't a pleasant sight. It was 16:01 hours by her watch when someone came down the hall outside. She drew her sidearm, one never assumed the other side wasn't prepared to shoot, and faced the opaque door. It opened, and it was Sarah, with Florian, a very welcome sight, with Wes for reinforcement. John Elway had come in among them, looking upset, and two of his staff attended, just ahead of Wes, but Sarah didn't seem worried in the least about them, only about the business at hand. Catelyn said, holstering her sidearm, "Reaction, Sarah, in the unit senior." "Well," was all Sarah said, and Sarah went to the monitors, on which 3 Azzy were quiet, likely asleep, and then went to the window of the first room, assessing the situation. Sarah punched that button for communication and said softly, "Raphael, Raphael." The subject convulsed and knotted himself tighter into the corner. "This is Ari I, your contract and your supervisor. I've come to help you. Can you get up?" Nothing for a moment. Then a slight response. A leg straightened out of the tuck, folded, knee against the floor. "This is your supervisor. Get up, Raphael." He moved, unfolded his arms, laid hands on the wall, got a knee under him, and tried to get up. "Are you all right, Raphael?" "I can't see." "Yes, you can," Sarah said, and Raphael turned his head and stared around him. "Is that better, Raphael?" A slight nod. "I'm your supervisor," Sarah said, in that calm, calm voice she could use, the tone that made Catelyn's own nerves twitch and brought a silence and quiet from all the Azzy present. "I'm your contract. It's all right. I have a resolution for you. Are you ready to hear it?" A nod. "Yes." "What you believed true was true before this. Now something else is true, and I tell you it's all right. Do you believe me? Do you accept it?" "I can't," Raphael said. Whatever someone had laid into him, it was a hard block. Sarah said, slightly more sternly, "Raphael." "Sarah?" "When I tell you something, it's true. It will always be true. Do you need to see your contract to know that?" "I want to see it," Raphael said. Very high beta, strong-willed, not easily overcome. Catelyn felt it in her own nerves. This Azzy was enemy, and resisting, hard. Sarah said quietly, "Catelyn, unlock the door." "Sarah, show him through the window." "Unlock the door, Catelyn. It's all right." She was alpha, and her resistance was harder to overcome than any beta ever devised. But she had to, if Sarah insisted. Florian and Wes were right, with Sarah, while she moved back to the console to open the door. If the enemy went berserk, they'd hit him with all they had. But, he's security, Sarah. Do it, Sarah said. Sarah's orders, in that tone, were Sarah's orders, off her own deep sets, and Catelyn moved and did it, watching the subject the while, her heart ticking up another notch as Florian and Wes moved in, right with Sarah. "These are your allies," Sarah said calmly, "and this is your contract." She took a small reader from her coat pocket and walked toward the subject, whose leaning against the wall could propel him off it in half a heartbeat. Oh, that is not a period. She took a small reader from her coat pocket and walked toward the subject, whose leaning against the wall could propel him off it in half a heartbeat, and Sarah was small and fragile in that reckoning, the subject a head taller, bloody-faced, drenched in sweat, and, at the moment, between loyalties. Sarah calmly held the reader out to him, and he stood away from the wall, took it, and looked at it. Looked for a long time. It was something to see one's real contract and read the name on it for the first time. It was identity, and right, and duty, all those things wrapped up in one. It had to have an effect. Just thinking about it had an effect on every Azzy in the room, and Catelyn moved close to the door, tense as drawn wire, ready to defend her contract if Raphael made a sudden move. "Do you believe," Sarah asked Raphael quietly, "that I'm your supervisor?" Nod. Second nod. The eyes flickered. Raphael was processing things. Hard. He shook badly as he gave the reader back. It could go any direction from here. Any direction. "It's all right," Sarah said. "You're one of us. You're safe. You're where you belong." He felt for the wall behind him, leaned against it. "It's all right. Come here. Come." He got his balance. Sarah stood there, holding out open arms, and that great tall Azzy came close and let her take his hands. "It's all right," Sarah said. "You only report to me, now and forever. All other claims on you are completely gone, erased. You don't have to do the other thing, do you?" "No," Raphael said. A huge sigh came out of him, and he said shakily, "I won't." Deep breath. "I don't have to." Not a lie, Catelyn thought. That had been a conflict. Bad one. Something in that tape had reached out and presented this Azzy an irresolvable contradiction, thrown him into a box to which only an appropriate supervisor had the key. And Sarah had come and rescued him. That simple. Catelyn found her leg twitching. She was that wired up. But Raphael was Sarah's now. Safe. She saw the same subtle shift in Florian's stance, and Wes's. 3 of them might not have been quick enough, strong enough, to take the man out fast enough, as close as Sarah had pushed it. They had to talk with her about that. But done was done. It was all right. The other 3, down the row, they were Sarah's, too, peacefully, with no reactions. This one had been a spy at the very least, and Sarah had found it out. "You can come up to the wing with us," Sarah told Raphael. "So can the other 3. You'll make things ready for the rest of your command." "Yes, Sarah," Raphael said. He squared himself on his feet, gave a little bow of the head. "My name is Florian," Florian said then. "Sarah's personal security." A nod over his shoulder. "Catelyn." And left. "Wes. Wes will walk up the hill with you. Everything will be provided for you in the barracks there, including uniforms. You don't have to bring anything but yourselves. You'll prepare the place for the others when they come." "Yes," Raphael said. His face had a different look.
And Azzy knew. He was still somewhat in shock, still rattled, and experience having knocked his defenses flat. It was a kind of openness that might never appear in this Azzy again. Right now he was fragile, entirely, needing protection. When he got where he was going, when he got an official assignment, and knew where he would be and what he was to do, he'd become what he would be, and not until then. Right now, he needed help.
"I'll meet you there," Sarah said, "and give you your orders."
"No, yes," he answered her, and nodded. "Yes, Sarah." The waking mind was in fragments. It needed time and quiet to reassemble its boundaries.
"You can go with Wes," Sarah said gently. "Go on now. The others will follow you when they wake."
The door was open. Wes took him by the arm and steered him out, past John Elway, past the other staff. Sweat stood on Elway's face. Fear for Sarah, or fear of his situation, Catelyn was unsure which, and didn't like that lack of information.
"It's perfectly all right," Sarah said, pausing for a moment to address the man. "I can take care of him. Catelyn will stay here and escort the others up the hill. Are we agreed about that?"
Elway nodded slightly, looking pale. Elway might, Catelyn thought, be just a little less conflicted than the Azzy, but Sarah was going to run Razun one day, and born men in Razun all knew that. If Elway was supposed to report this, he might decide to be careful what he reported and to whom. He was a very worried born man. And maybe it wasn't just Raphael Sarah had worked, omitting to give Elway any clear indication what he ought to do and what was safe. Instead, Sarah simply walked off with Florian, behind Wes and Raphael. Raphael was theirs now. Very, very little chance he wasn't. It was a scary thing to watch. It had been a far scarier moment when Sarah had walked into that room. But given Sarah's work, it was very likely it wouldn't be the last time Sarah personally did a thing like that, no matter how they objected. And her security just had to be in position, and fast. Very, very fast. Catelyn thought. And armed with non-lethals next time. Sarah had surprised her security. It felt wrong to complain about it, but it certainly shouldn't happen twice, and it was their job to take precautions. There was another matter. Raphael had come from Hicks, at least by previous contract. That was worth talking over with Florian and with Sarah on an absolutely urgent basis. For right now, Hicks and all his immediate staff were on her unreliable list. Book 3, Section 1, Chapter 8. June 7, 2424, 1712 hours. Catelyn was back, Ari noted, from the minder link in her office. Florian had escorted her back. Wes was still downstairs, helping Raphael and his three settle into their temporary quarters. Marco had been manning the security station solo the while, and Ari Marco had been manning the security station solo the while, and Ari let pass a little sigh, now that everybody was back safely. 4 contracts down, 26 more to set, and there was a message on the minder this evening from Justin, informing her that he didn't think Library had given her everything it said it had given him. 4 contracts down, 26 more to set, and there was a message on the minder this evening from Justin, informing her that he didn't think Library had given him everything it said it had given him. No, she noted, at her console, Justin hadn't quite caught the problem. But she hadn't either, from a scan of the set.
It was there, but you could spend hours and hours looking through the set and the specific individual's list of tapes given, searching for something to make sense of a set of lines in that program. All the earmarks of reference to deep set, but nothing in the deep set record that would quite satisfy it. It was like an if-then link, but when you got there, there was nothing listed. Every instruction ever given to that ASI was supposed to be recorded in his specific manual. But if it wasn't? That if-then was just a shape without anything to attach to, a point at which hooks could be set to turn an ASI into a spy. Or assassin, if that was the game, and Justin had found something wrong. He just hadn't assumed it wasn't him, so he was still looking for the link. She sent him a memo that said, "All done. You should have trusted yourself. You were right to keep looking. Your delay warned me to keep looking, and library wasn't lying to us. Night, both of you." Nasty. It wouldn't let Justin get a peaceful sleep. He'd worry about it. He'd reach a right conclusion. And now, after one long, hard stretch of work, he knew what Regenesis tape looked like, and he'd found a problem and put a finger close to it. Not too shabby an accomplishment on his part, considering she'd been working with security sets for years. And what someone had done with Raphael, the deep level at which that compulsion had gone in, said Alpha Supervisor in blazing letters. A Beta Supervisor could marginally have done it, and it was true it hadn't been totally neat, but it had been damned deep and resistant, all of which argued only that the perpetrator wasn't the best Alpha Supervisor in Regenesis. The best? That was, in her private assessment, beginning to be her. But it left Yanni, Hicks, Jordan Warwick, Justin Warwick. And, postscript, there was also grim old Chi Prang, the head of Alpha Section in the ASI labs. Prang could have done it, at someone's orders, or in collusion with someone, and she didn't know the woman. Fast computer search said Prang was 137 years old and had, yes, worked in that capacity during the first Ari's regime and Dennis's and now Yanni's. That was a wide range of potential allegiances. Prang had 5 assistants, any one of which was provisionally Alpha licensed, which meant they had the skills but had to have Prang's oversight. That spread the search wider afield, and led, very probably, further and further from the culprit, because subordinates wouldn't have as immediate a motive. But she was wrong about there being just 5 people. Oh. So she was wrong about there being just 5 people. But the list of original suspects was still the primary list. Yanni, she was relatively sure, could have done a better job. Justin wouldn't have done it in the first place. Jordan hadn't had access, and that left the fingerprints of the director of Regenesis, Hicks, who had the rating to handle his own assistant, but who didn't practice on a wider scale. His command was Beta, in the main. Very, very few Alphas, and those not socialized into the general society. One sec. My brain's zapped. My brain, just completely dwindled there. I apologize. Okay, let's try this again. That left the fingerprints of the director of Regenesis, Hicks, who had the rating to handle his own assistant, but who didn't practice on a wider scale. His command was Beta, in the main. Very, very few Alphas, and those not socialized into the general society. Specialists, technicals. They'd report their own personal problems to Hicks, but being purely technicals, they weren't in a position, in their ivory tower, to encounter much angst. That meant Hicks wouldn't be often in practice. A provisionally licensed, only occasional kind of operator wasn't really up to finesse, unless he'd been shown how to do it, and was following a sort of recipe. There were 2 styles of dealing with ASI difficulties. One was the meticulous route that figured a supervisor could make a mistake. You searched and researched the files until there was a theory and a treatment. It was a very soft, very gentle method of going after the problem and fixing it, which didn't always work at optimum, unless you were as good as Justin, but at least it didn't generally go badly. If you were good, you could eventually lay a finger on the specific line in the set that was causing the conflict and change it, with proper annotations on the record. That was very much Justin. The other was the brute force method. When you wanted something and knew the basic architecture of the set, you could ignore most of the subsequent manual and go right after the primal sets, gut level. You could do that if you didn't, ultimately, care about the result long term, or you could also do it if you were that good, that you could work at primary level in a subject, and if you had a clear vision how it could make everything subsequent settle into place. I'm that good, she thought. She'd taken a chance with it. Was still taking a chance with it, in the sense that she now believed Raphael was clear, because she'd set his contract very tightly, very exclusively on her, as the resolver of all conflicts, the source of all orders. She'd been brought up on the first Ari's tapes. She'd been working with 2 alpha sets for years, and, being the born man equivalent of an alpha, what she read in the manuals resonated at gut level. And the differences between an alpha and a theta resonated that way, and, once she got into the manuals, beta level made sense. The same with gamma, zeta, and eta, each with their own constellation of needs and satisfactions. Even for a born man, it made sense. Why was the key. Why individuals did things even when they had consistently negative outcomes. Why people had to do things. She'd been asking that question of the universe for years. And born men got the worst of it all their lives. Why did they have to make Why did they have to take Maman away? Why was Dennis nice to me sometimes? Why is Jordan what he is? Why does Yanni bring me presents? Who is Hicks working for? Those were all important questions, and she'd fairly well gotten the answer to all but the last one, which might lie somewhere tangled with the cruel things someone had done to Raphael. She was very, very thankful Catelyn hadn't had to shoot Raphael, or that she herself hadn't broken the law and not been able to fix it. Typical of the really big problems in the Azzy world, the fix was actually simple, because the layers were so clean. Born men were a muddled mess, as if someone had stirred a layered pudding with a knife. But when an Azzy was in primary conflict, his earliest, most basic self-protective rule was, appeal to a supervisor. Second was, the contract is the ultimate right. And when Raphael had been drugged down and wide open, she'd laid hands right on the conflict. She'd given him the contract as a beginning, and that was all right. He'd taken it in, and immediately his reservations had attached, and he'd arranged his safe loophole. And then she'd hit him with the deep set changes and a reiteration of the contract, which had torn it all wide open, and set it up for healing. He'd sleep once he'd carried out her orders to arrange the barracks. He'd work until he dropped, sleep like the dead, and wake up clear and sure of himself and with all his layers in good order. The compulsion for a dual loyalty had to have been planted way, way back, from when he was a child, or it had to have been planted fairly near term by someone with the ability to plant it, which again said Alpha Supervisor. But say that the compulsion had been there for his whole life. Fingers flew. Base 1 slithered quietly across department illness. Oh, Jesus. Fingers flew. Base 1 slithered quietly across departmental lines and nabbed another Azzy record, this one from a very young trainee designated for Rezun Sec.
Another B-28, BA-289 to be precise, which meant there was as many as 7 more B-28s already out there somewhere. It took a computer comparison to wade through that training record, proving it was identical to BR-283's, and a little research to determine that that particular ASI, BA-289, had been born and started on that path in 2412, before BR-283 had proved out, so there were 3 others old enough to be in place somewhere, and, after 283, 4 more theoretically in the system younger than 289. You didn't start proliferating a new routine through a gene set like that until you'd proved it out. Not if you were operating by the book. Was BR-283 the first of his kind? Joyeux came in to ask if Sarah would want supper delayed.
10 minutes,
she said, because she was close, and she had an idea exactly what she was looking for. And then there they were. 1 B-28 in Razun space up on Beta Station. 1 in Novgorod in the Razun Sec Special Operations Office. 1, oh, delightful, was in Razun space on Fargon in Ollie's service. BR-280, named Regis, an operations agent, had been born in 2373 and had been in service, in her predecessor's service no less, when she died. The first Ari's security staff had been reassigned, scattered to the edge of space, evidently, when Gerard took over. Oh, damned right they had scattered them. That staff, if questioned, knew things. And there was no damned reason her predecessor would have created an off-the-books routine in this Regis, who was in her security group, unless she hadn't trusted the security group itself. And that was too many layers to be sane, especially when the first Ari could have peeled any of that group like an onion if she had any suspicion. No. Someone had actually infiltrated Ari's staff, and Dennis, putatively, had been the agency of her death, which Gerard had pinned on Jordan, and Yanni had shipped Jordan to Planis to avoid a trial. While the original Florian and Catelyn had died, and the security detail had been shipped out, scattered to all points of Union space, not one of them left on Cytine. Chin on hand, she contemplated that scenario. Razun Sec, an ASI that had served the first Ari, now with Ollie. Another other ASI who had never served Ari, at Beta, in Novgorod. And now she got one, in Hicks's goodwill gift to her. If it were the first Ari's programming, she'd surely have had the finesse to vary the gene set and the psych set of her spies. Piece of cake for Ari I. Someone of lesser ability, on the other hand, might have stuck with the first success and built spies like production items, then managed to get his favorite number assigned hither and yon. Maybe the same person had moved BR-280 out, fast, with all the others, after the first Ari's death. To have killed 280 with Florian and Catelyn might have drawn attention to him and his history, and all the others. She drew in a slow breath. Hicks could, if he worked at it, reprogram a beta, but Hicks hadn't been in office then. God, this was archaeology. Everything was buried. First logical query was to be sure the Regis base program was identical to Raphael's, and that all the others were. Base 1 filched that manual from deep, deep storage. Rezu never erased a manual. Any version of it. Beyond 10 minutes. Joyeux came back, a little diffident.
I apologize, Ari said. This isn't finished yet. Tell Cook I am so sorry. Another 20 minutes. Staff should have their supper.
Joyeux left, and she let the computer sift through that mountain of material, which took only one of those minutes. It flagged no difference at all. So BR-280 was the same as 281. That meant the window for that special routine had always been there in the mindset. in the mindset. And possibly that same routine, which wasn't in the manual, illegal as hell, had indeed existed in 280. She couldn't lay hands on 280 to find out, not easily, but she'd bet 280 reported to Hicks, who hadn't been in charge of Regenesis long enough to have set it up that way. Gerard had been. It had been Gerard's office. Oh, lay bets on Gerard. There was the mind that might have done it. Hicks had only been number 2 to Gerard. Hicks might not even have known. But he'd very likely known the special use of the BR-28 series, and he'd seen to it that one got into her unit. If that was true, then the Nyes still had tentacles threaded through Regenesis, and through Regenesis into all sorts of places. The dead man's hand was still on the controls. His programs persisted into the next regime, still on Gerard's orders.
Thank you, Uncle Gerard. Dear Uncle Gerard. You could so easily have done it to Raphael and all his kind, and the labs are still producing them. You didn't do that for Dennis. To be sure, he got information he wouldn't know how to chase. You'd do anything for Dennis. You'd set it up so Dennis would get his information even if you weren't there. And the BR-28s are just the set I know about. I know one thing at least. You've laid traps you neglected to tell me about. Dennis was still alive, and you wouldn't betray him. I understand that. And I understand Dennis was protecting me. But you ended up putting me in danger to give Dennis that little advantage in keeping power, because you didn't tell me there was anything like this buried in Regenesis. And that makes me just a little mad, Uncle Gerard. So now I know what you did, and what your mindset is capable of in your next incarnation toward my successor. All sorts of betrayal for the one you're protecting. And I see this very well, and I see very well how your own mindset arrived at the notion of this compulsion to report. You made it your own mirror. You so liked information. You never trusted any of your own subordinates. I'll bet you even planted one on Hicks. On your own second-in-command. I'll bet if I went over his beta assistants, I'd find one with a block very much like that. I bet you did the same. I bet you did some very special work on that one other Asi. And 10 of the BR-28s? Oh, that was wicked, Uncle. But now I do know. And solving Raphael's problem, I know what to do about you. Dennis doesn't need to be born. Just you do. Just you, to be fixed on me, Uncle, the way you fixed on Dennis. Dennis has just become irrelevant. Good. That makes me happier. I'm sorry about it. Simultaneously, and I wish I didn't have to, but I think we're both going to be happier in the long run. She prepared a letter to Yanni, just in case Yanni had gotten wind of her activity with her new Hicks-provided staff. Yanni might be guilty as sin in the first Ari's death, at least in the cover-up and blaming Jordan part of it. Yanni might know exactly what Gerard had been up to, infiltrating Regenesis space at Fraggoth and Beta. And if he did know, and he'd been letting that happen and not telling her, he was on the verge of becoming irrelevant too. Dear Uncle Yanni, she wrote, with a little pain in her heart, I turned up something, and fixed it, so you know. I think you should be aware. I leave it to you whether to tell Director Hicks his own staff may have a problem. Be discreet. You know what your lines of honest communication are. Then the stinger. Please include me in them from now on. Oh, sorry, that's a period. Please include me in them from now on. Give me one sec here.
Okay. Breathe with me. Trying to find where section 3 starts so I can bracket accordingly here. Okay, section 3 is on 406. These just keep getting longer. I may have to split that in half. Okay. Because I'm running out of time here. Yeah, I'm going to split the next section in half between Friday and whatever my next day is. Because I have to run. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. I do appreciate you. If you're tuning into this after the fact, I appreciate you too. So yeah, traps, subterfuge, and shenanigans abound. This one is very plotting heavy, politics heavy. There are the occasional action sequence, but this one is not very action heavy. One of the things that I really admire about CJ Cherryh is how she can write a book with barely any actual action sequences at all and still keep it fairly riveting. This one is a bit more of a struggle than most, I feel. Because you're kind of trapped in these characters' heads, specifically Ari's head most of the book. And there's a degree of repetition going on there that can get a little crazy-making, but she does iterate on it. And it makes sense. Anyway, so yes, we will continue this in 2-3 days' time. Alrighty, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you all. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. Toodaloo. Until next time.